Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this presentation we're going to be continuing our hypertrophy training guidelines, and this one is going to be specifically on the back musculature. So the first thing we need to do is establish the anatomy of the back so that we know what muscles we're talking about and what movements cause activation of these muscles. So the back has a lot of muscles there, and it's a very complex set of muscles. But a lot of these muscles are very small and located underneath all these bigger muscles, which means that they don't actually contribute very much to the physical appearance of the back. And therefore, they're not of as much interest to us. But in this, when we're talking about the back, we're talking about these sort of four primary muscles here. So the first one is going to be the latissimus dorsi, which is this big muscle here in the mid to lower back. And it starts here on the spine, attaches there, and then it goes all the way and attaches up on the upper arm near the shoulder. The next one is the trapezius, which is these muscles here. And the trapezius is this entire muscle outlined here. However, when we're talking about the back, we're only going to be talking about the middle and the lower fibers. So from about this point here, everything below that. And the reason we're talking about that is because a lot of the time when people think of the trapezius, they think of the upper traps here, but they actually have a different function, these fibers here, to the middle and lower fibers. So we're going to leave that out of this video and talk about that in another presentation. But for this one, we're just going to be talking about the middle and lower fibers of the trapezius. We also have the rhomboids, which are here. This is the rhomboids minor and then the rhomboids major. And these are fairly decent sized muscles. However, they are located underneath the trapezius here, which means that they don't actually have that much of a contribution to the physical appearance of the back, but adding mass to these muscles are likely to enhance the overall appearance, even though they cannot directly be seen. So we're still going to talk about the rhomboids. Then lastly, we have the erector spinae, which are these long snake-shaped muscles here that go up and along the back next to the spine. And these muscles are, again, they are not superficial. They're located underneath the latissimus dorsi here. However, they do have quite a profound impact on the look of the appearance of the back. So people with well-developed spinal erectors, it's quite obvious that you can see them. So we're still going to talk about the erector spinae. So what movements do we have to do to actually activate these muscles here? So shoulder extension is the first one. So if we imagine in this diagram here, from a bird's eye view, the person has their arm overhead. And now imagine that they are putting their arm down towards the front of their body, like they'd be doing a lat pullover, and keep going down until the arm goes behind them. That's shoulder extension. So that's the first main movement that most of the back muscles contribute to, especially the latissimus dorsi. The next one is shoulder adduction, which is going to be, if we have a look at this diagram here, imagining the arms overhead again, and imagine putting the arm down by the side towards the side of the body. So from up to down towards the side of the body, that is shoulder adduction. And that's going to be another primary function, primarily for the latissimus dorsi again. A big one here is scapular retraction. So that is basically, if we have a look at this diagram here, it's when you squeeze your shoulder blades back and together. So imagine pulling your shoulders back and showing your chest. That's scapular retraction, and that's going to be a big movement that is performed by the rhomboids and then the middle and lower traps. Spinal lateral flexion is an interesting one that doesn't often get talked about during back training, but essentially the lats also have a function of flexing the spine laterally. So if you can imagine, I don't have a diagram here, but if you can imagine this torso here, bending that, so imagine pushing the head towards this side and bending that entire spine over to the side, actually is one of the movements of the lats. So that's something to think about, to incorporate into our techniques, when we're doing back exercises, things such as rows or single arm rows in particular. And then the last one here is spinal extension, and this is primarily for the erector spinae. So if you can imagine, if this torso here, his head is forward, and then he brings his head and his entire spine back to upright. So that movement of bringing the spine back to upright is spinal extension, and hence the name erector spinae. So it erects the spine, so it makes the spine erect and upright. So what exercises are we going to use to hit the musculature of our back? So we're going to split this up into two primary categories. The first one is our heavy loaded exercises, which generally have slightly lower range of motion. And then we also have our larger range of motion exercises. However, these are probably not going to be loaded, not going to be able to be loaded as much as these heavy loaded exercises. So the first one, weighted pull-ups, as we can see in the picture here. Great exercise. Bent over rows or bent rows, pen lay rows, so any sort of variation of bent or pen lay row, either directly from the floor or hovering above the floor and with different torso angles. Then we also have something like a dumbbell row, a single arm dumbbell row, or a dumbbell row with the torso supported on a bench. And then we have something like a landmine row, and these are a basic list. There's obviously a more extensive list, but these are the primary heavy loaded exercises that are going to target the back musculature. So landmine row, something like having the bar in a landmine and using some sort of attachment to perform a row. And then we have the accessory exercises that are going to be loaded slightly less but also have greater range of motion, which has benefits. So we can have any sort of cable row, and that can be unilateral or bilateral. So one arm, we can do that single arm or with both arms. And the benefit of doing things with single arms is because when we looked at before, we had that spinal lateral flexion or even spinal rotation, which we didn't have in here, actually is going to involve particularly the lats in that movement. So we can do things with both arms or one arm at a time. With, again, that trade-off being both arms, you're going to be able to use more load, whereas one arm, you're going to be able to use less load, but also get more range of motion. Same thing with pull downs, so we can use any sort of attachment. I prefer some sort of narrow grip attachment, which is going to allow greater range of motion. But again, you can do that with different grip widths, different attachments, and also single arm or both arms at the same time. Then we can have something like a cable or a dumbbell pullover as a real high range of motion, but then again, quite low loads are able to be used with that. And the other thing to mention here is that we want a mixture generally of vertical pulling and horizontal pulling. And that's just going to hit basically the same musculature, but slightly emphasize different muscles. And the last thing here, which I've put separately, is going to be, it's not really a heavy loaded or a large range of motion exercise, but it's more to target those spinal erectors. Something like a back extension is going to really hit those spinal erectors. You'll get some development just from doing things like bent over rows. If you're doing things like deadlifts and Romanian deadlifts, you will get some of that spinal erector development. However, if you really want to maximize that development, you can use an exercise like a back extension to do that. And really, the back extension is sort of like training the abs. You don't need to do it to get development. However, doing extra can help with extra development. And finally, an example back program that you can use throughout the week for hypertrophy would be something like this. If we have 2 sessions where we hit our back muscles, on Monday, let's say, for example, we do bent over rows or bent rows, 4 sets of 8 with 80 kilos, just theoretically. And then the other exercise, we do a cable pull down. So we have 1 horizontal rowing exercise and 1 vertical pulling exercise. And we do 4 sets of 10 with 50 kilos. So this is going to be, because it's a lot lighter, this exercise, we can't use as much weight. We're going to work in a higher rep range. And then on the next day, we're going to do the same exercises. So we've still got one horizontal, one vertical pulling exercise, but we're going to work in slightly higher rep ranges with respectively, and also reduce the load slightly. So again, we're pretty much doing the same exercises, we're doing a similar difficulty, however we're working in slightly different rep ranges and therefore loads. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you got something out of this video, and make sure you check out the next hypertrophy training guidelines on all the different body parts. So you can subscribe to Flow High Performance on this YouTube channel, and you can also find Flow High Performance on Instagram and on Facebook. And on Instagram and Facebook, you'll find these research infographics, which are essentially the latest research summarized into these easy to understand pictures, so that you can stay up to date with the latest research in sports performance training without actually having to go into the journal articles yourselves and read the entire paper. So you can watch another video here and also check out the latest video on this channel, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this.